I'm going to take you through the game between Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Magnus Carlsen from the final round of the Sinquefield Cup 2019. Now, going into that final round, Ding Liren was a half point clear, but Magnus Carlsen had won his first game of the tournament and he had a chance to catch Ding. Ding played against Mamedyarov. He had white, but well, he never really got the advantage. So Carlsen knew that, well, if he managed to win this game, then he would have a pretty good chance of sharing first place with Ding. He played his knight c6 and bishop b5 from Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. Now, the other day I mentioned the fact that I thought Magnus's problems in this tournament were because his opponents were getting used to this knight c6 Sicilian from Carlsen. And for example, Nakamura and Anand had managed to get pretty decent positions against him, although those games ended in a draw. Basically, knight c6 doesn't have quite the same surprise value. So let's see what happened in this game. Well, Maxime is repeating the line that Anand played a few rounds before in the same tournament with d4. Now, against Anand, Carlsen had played the bishop g7, and he was a bit worse out of the opening. In this game, well, he'd obviously done his research and he exchanged on d4 and played f6, which doesn't feel very nice somehow to have played this move, but it's very difficult to exploit this move when white does not have a light squared bishop, for example, and black has this beautiful clump of centre pawns that guard these squares in the middle of the board. So it's a slightly unusual system that Carlsen is playing. Now, his next move is very important. If white gets in c5, that will break up the pawn, so it's imperative that Carlsen plays c5 himself. And again, it looks ugly to have this pawn on f6. It's very hard to exploit these light square weaknesses, and later on it may be possible to break out with f5. Now, there has been one previous game with this system, and that's between Kovalev and Pragyanananda from Vachier-Lagrave 2019, which went knight c3 in this position. And actually, Prag got a pretty decent position as black. But we have b3 today from Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. And the knight came to h6 by Carlsen, if I can actually play the move here. And now rook b8. Now this, as we'll see, is actually a very important little move. Here, it seems to me that white needs to place rooks on all these squares. You know, it's one of these positions where you're not quite sure where the rooks belong yet, but and it's very hard to determine white's middle game strategy. I have to say, with black's pieces concentrated over here, and I would perhaps look to break on the queen side like this with a3 and then b4. But Vachier-Lagrave went for some kingside play with rook ae1 and then h4, looking to soften up black's kingside. But I repeat, I'm not sure this has a very good chance of success when black is very solid in the centre and has these minor pieces protecting the king as well. I really like Magnus's next move. He played rook b7. Now that's a mysterious move. I mean, rook b8 in itself was a little bit mysterious, but rook b7 follows that up. This is a great move because he can see that Vachier-Lagrave is playing on the king side, and he wants to be ready potentially to guard along the 7th rank. So, I mean, obviously the pawn on e7 stands in the way at the moment, but watch out for that. And it means it's kind of insurance policy. If white, decides to throw the kitchen sink at the king side, then the rook will be ready to defend along the 2nd rank. So let's see how this works. h5. Now this is a really interesting moment. If the pawn is left here, then white will soften it up and maybe play knight h4. But we have g5, which is actually fine. Black is still very, very solid. And this pawn turns out to be a very useful soldier in the struggle for the central squares. Now here, it's possible to swing this knight round here, but I mean, I still think black is absolutely fine. Knight h2 from Vachier-Lagrave, making room for the f-pawn. And now we see that this position is has some similarities with variations of the Sicilian, the Najdorf, for example, where this pawn advances to g5 to give some control over f4, preventing white playing f4 to drive away a knight on e5. A very, very common theme. Now, first glance, this looks still rather worrying for black with f4 coming, but king h8 is an excellent move. Now, Maxime follows up with f4, but you can see that that knight still pretty good, and the rook switches to the g-file, and with the h-pawn's advance, that means that all these squares on the g-file are actually much weaker, and black has the possibility to counterattack. Rook e3 from Vachier-Lagrave, perhaps looking to swing the rook over to g3. I mean, it seems to me that black should be fine here with his control over these squares. And also, the queen can come over to the king side very easily. And yes, potentially that rook as well. So the communications within black's camp are actually pretty good. And now f5, and that's a very bold move from Carlsen. Attacking the centre, I mean, positionally very desirable. So you're using your pawn here to destroy white's centre, and also opening up the line for this bishop. It's very ambitious. But obviously tactically, things start to explode now. Now, Maxime's next move is a blunder, a real blunder. He was moving quite quickly in this game. Unusually, it was Carlsen that was actually behind on the clock. But Maxime was moving too quickly. He should take here. And, well, this is still a very double-edged position, actually. But he played knight f3 instead, and this is a terrible move. Carlsen sees the chance to exchange here and play e5. Not taking here, knight d2 is still very double-edged, but e5 just lands white in terrible trouble. So the bishop is attacked. Let's try a simple move. If the bishop comes back to c1, then f4. And then we can see that that rook swings across, and that is just route one straight through to white's king. And in fact, all black's pieces will be able to contribute to the attack. That is an utter disaster. That is like a kick from the goalie straight downfield, straight to your centre forward, heads it in the goal. Completely winning for black. So after e5, Vachier-Lagrave in massive trouble. Now he decided to give up material, which is probably the best practical chance, but essentially white is lost from this point. It's not even necessary to take the bishop. You could swing with the queen actually, but well, Carlsen, after about a 20-minute think, decides to take, and there's nothing wrong with this. So this is the idea from white. He does manage to get material back, but actually white is ahead here. So grabs the knight on f3. Vachier-Lagrave takes the rook back, and now the situation is knight and bishop against a rook, but this knight finds a very good square on d4, and there is still pressure on white's king, so black must be winning this position. A rook here and knight d4. Rook takes pawn and bishop f5. Notice it's move 31 before that bishop moves. Here's my top tip for the day. You don't always have to, if you castle on the king side, it's not always necessary to develop your queen's bishop. Very often the best square for that bishop is actually on its starting square. If you think of lots of Spanish games like that as white as well. I notice quite a few of my students have this desire to bring out both their bishops very quickly. You can hang back. There you go. Anyway, let's move on. The game. b4. So Vachier-Lagrave is looking to open some lines to attack the queen, but actually Magnus handles this very well. So he just nudges the bishop back. And as the pawn has now advanced, then this pawn is vulnerable. But this is very cool defense from Carlsen, actually. He can see that that bishop is beautifully protected, and that just shields the king. And so these rooks actually don't achieve very much. And queen e3, and black still has some attack here with the combination of rook, queen and knight. Now there was a bit of footling around here. Magnus decides to reset, and that's not a bad idea. He's still winning this position. Shouldn't exchange queens, that would give white a chance, but he keeps going here and just nudges back, protecting that pawn. He's basically he's angling for some big hit here. It might be knight e2 and then putting it on g3. It could be bringing the knight back to attack the rook, but he's just waiting to see how white plays actually. But he hasn't lost his winning advantage. And actually with the queen sidelined on h5, now he goes back in for the kill, and this is now decisive. If king h2, queen e5 will transpose back to the game. And now this is completely lost. Of course, if the king comes up, then queen g1 check, and rook here. And now queen e3 was the final move of the game. So why did Maxime resign? Well, okay, let me show you this variation. One thing is that rook is on prise. So if rook here, check, and I'm going to take you right through to mate. And that's an attractive checkmate. There we go. So with that win, Magnus Carlsen actually leaps up into first place. So at the end of the tournament, he was sharing first place with Ding Liren. So Ding and Carlsen both on 6.5 points. They've tied for first, and they're actually going to have a tie break later today of 2 25-minute games, and then blitz games if they're still even after those 2 rapid play games. Carlsen doesn't have a brilliant record against Ding. He finds him a difficult opponent, so let's see how that goes. Having said that, it's difficult to bet against Magnus. He has won every single tournament playoff since 2007, and he's won on the last 10 occasions that he's had a playoff. So Ding's going to have a tough time, but all credit to Magnus for winning his last 2 games and, rescuing a tournament which seemed like pretty much a failure. So incredible that he's sharing first, but I think you need to rest and a bit of refreshing of his perhaps his openings and just a break. He's played so many tournaments this year. Listen, if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. If you want to support the channel, then please do check out the links to PayPal and patreon.com. I mean, if you want to check out all the playlists we've got over 1,000 videos on the channel. Check out the Carlsen playlist. Check out the other games in this tournament. There's loads of stuff on the channel. Thanks for watching.